Hi everyone, Miss McGulloch, and today what we're focusing on is Chapter 9 of the BFG, the Bloodbottler, and we're going to be reading through it today, and then we've got a task to do after. So first thing first, to keep us focused with our learning, is to take a look at our learning intention grid. So this has what we're learning to do today, which is to visualise a character through the use of evidence from the story. That sounds really complicated, but it's not. Basically, you're visualising what the character looks like and showing what made you come to that thought or how you thought of them in that way. How are we going to do it? We're going to read the story closely, either alone or with the teacher, so either with me, or you can pause the video, skip over listening to me natter on about the story, and read the book yourself or to someone else in the house or anything like that. There is the PowerPoint which goes along with this video, and then you're going to do your own visualization of the character. So why are we learning it? What's the point of it? It's to help you be a successful learner, so it helps us to visualise the characters in our mind and helps us understand the story. If you can sort of imagine it playing out in your head a bit clearer, then it makes the story a bit more interesting, I always think. You can use this when you're reading outside school. It is also quite a good thing if you're painting from memory, is if you are painting something you would have to visualise it, so using these skills are quite helpful. And it also will help you to create your own stories. If you have your own dialogue going on and you're trying to get a message across, then understanding what another author has done will help you do that. So how we know we've been successful, you'll be able to identify a personality trait or how the character looks. So that's either looks or personality. Very straightforward. You should hopefully have a mix of the two whenever we get to our visualizer. You're going to visualize using evidence from the book, which is basically that you're going to use quotes to help explain exactly what you mean. You're going to give a page number to show where you got it from. You've not just plucked it out of midair. And you're going to sketch your visualization or what you have in your head of that character. Okay, and that will come at the end. Before we even get started, guys, I'm going to tell you exactly what today's task is. So as we read through, you can help identify things, go, right, I'm going to need that later, I'm going to use it, right, that's a really good thing. I'm maybe going to put a wee sticky note on the page to help me remember or anything like that. It'd be really useful. It means that you're not having to read the same chapter maybe 6 or 7 times to make sure you've got everything. And it helps us focus exactly what we're going to do in our mind. So today's task, we're looking at visualizing a character. When we're reading the chapter Bloodbottler, which is the character, this is who you're going to be visualizing, this is who you're going to try and imagine in your head. And because this chapter introduces him, it's a great chapter to start to try and visualize him and create this image of him, because you've never met him before. This is a fresh start. So remember to listen out for personality, if he's mean, if he's happy, if he's sad, anything like that. It might not necessarily say it, but it might do something to imply it, maybe the way that he talks or maybe the way that he treats other characters. Be very mindful of that. There are physical descriptions, which is what he'll look like or how he moves or anything that could help you create a clear visualization of what this character's like, that you can clearly see him in your head and you know exactly what is going on in this story. So now that we've got our learning intention, lock it in. Now that we've got our task for today, lock it in. Have your success criteria floating about there as well. You need to remember that so that you can focus your reading and you can find exactly what you need as we're reading through. So we are on page 47 and the chapter is called The Bloodbottler. So kind of gives you a warning that this chapter is all about that character that we are doing our visualization of today. So definitely keep an eye out. So suddenly a tremendous thumping noise came from outside the cave entrance, and a voice like thunder shouted, "Runt! Is you there, Runt? I is hearing you jabbling. Who's you jabbling to, Runt?" "Look out!" cried the BFG. "It's the Bloodbottler." But before he had finished speaking, the stone was rolled aside, and a 50-foot giant, more than twice as tall and as wide as the BFG, came striding into the cave. He was naked except for a dirty piece of cloth around his bottom. Sophie was on the tabletop. The enormous, partly eaten snozzcumber was lying near her. She ducked behind it. The creature came clumping into the cave and stood towering over the BFG. "Who is you jabbling to here just now?" he boomed. "I was jabbling to myself," the BFG answered. "Piffle fizz," shouted the Bloodbottler. "Bog swallop," he boomed. "You is talking to a human being, that's what I is thinking." "No, no," cried the BFG. "Yes, yes," boomed the Bloodbottler. "I is guessing you has snitched away a human being and brought it back to your bunghole as a pet. So now I is winkling it out and guzzling at extra snacks before my supper." The poor BFG was very nervous. "There's no one here," he stammered. "Why don't you leave me alone?" The Bloodbottler pointed his finger as large as a tree trunk at the BFG. "Runty little scum-screwer," he shouted. "Piffling little swish-figgler. Squimping little bogwort, pruny little pog-swizzler. I is now going to search the primroses." He grabbed the BFG by the arm. "And you is going to help me do it. Us together is going to winkle out this tasteful little human being," he shouted. The BFG had intended to whisk Sophie off the table as soon as he had got the chance, and hide her behind his back, but now there was no hope of doing this. Sophie peered around the chewed-off end of the enormous snozzcumber, watching the two giants as they moved away down the cave. The Bloodbottler was a gruesome sight. His skin was reddish pink. There was black hair sprouting on his chest and arms, and on his stomach. The hair on his head was long and dark and tangled. His foul face was round and squashy looking. The eyes were tiny black holes. The nose was small, but the mouth was huge. It spread right across the face, almost ear to ear, and it had lips that were like two gigantic purple frankfurters lying one on top of each other. Craggy yellow teeth stuck out between the two purple frankfurter lips, and rivers of spit ran down over the chin. It was not in the least difficult to believe that this ghastly brute ate men, women, and children every night. The Bloodbottler, still holding the BFG by the arm, was examining the rows and rows of bottles. "You and your pibbling bottles," he shouted. "What is you putting in them?" "Nothing that would interest you," BFG answered. "You's only interested in guzzling human beings." "And you as dotty as Dogswoggler," cried the Bloodbottler. Soon the Bloodbottler would be coming back, Sophie told herself, and he was bound to search the tabletop. But she couldn't possibly jump off the table. It was 12 feet high. She'd break a leg. The snozzcumber, although it was as thick as a perambulator, was not going to hide her if the Bloodbottler picked her up. Just to be note, guys, perambulator, I worked out, it's a pram. It's an old-fashioned word for a pram. So it's about as thick as a pram. Where was he? She examined the chewed off end. It had large seeds in the middle, one as big as a melon. They were embedded in soft, slimy stuff. Taking care to stay out of sight, Sophie reached forward and scooped away half a dozen of these seeds. This left a hole in the middle of the snozzcumber large enough for her to crouch in so long as she rolled herself up into a ball. She crawled into it. It was a wet, slimy hiding place, but what did that matter if it was going to save her from being eaten? The Bloodbottler and the BFG were coming back towards the table now. The BFG was nearly fainting with fear. Any moment, he was telling himself, Sophie would be discovered and eaten. Suddenly the Bloodbottler grabbed the half-eaten snozzcumber. The BFG stared at the bare table. "Sophie, where is she?" he thought desperately. "You couldn't possibly be jumping off that high table, so where is she hiding, Sophie?" "So this is the filthy, rotsome glubbage you is eating," boomed the Bloodbottler, holding up the partly eaten snozzcumber. "You must be cockles to be guzzling such rub squash." For a moment the Bloodbottler seemed to have forgotten about his search for Sophie. The BFG decided to lead him further off track. "That is the scrumdiddlyuncious snozzcumber," he said. "I is guzzling it gleefully every night and day. Is you never trying a snozzcumber, Bloodbottler?" "Human beings is juicier," the Bloodbottler said. "You's talking rummy tot," BFG said, growing braver by the second. He was thinking that if only he could get the Bloodbottler to take one bite of the repulsive vegetable, the sheer foulness of its flavour would send him bellowing out of the cave. "I is happy to let you sample it," the BFG went on, "but please, when you see how truly glumptious it is, do not be guzzling the whole thing. Leave me a little snitchet for my supper." The Bloodbottler stared suspiciously with small piggy eyes at the snozzcumber. Sophie crouched inside the chewed-off end and began to tremble all over. "You is not switch-fiddling me, is you?" said the Bloodbottler. "Never," cried the BFG passionately. "Take a bite and I am positive you will be shouting out, 'Oh, how scrumdiddlyumptious this wonder veg is.'" The BFG could see the greedy the Bloodbottler's mouth beginning to water more than ever at the prospect of extra food. "Vegetables is very good for you," he went on. "It is not healthsome always to be eating meaty things." Just this once, the Bloodbottler said. I is going to taste these rotten meats of yours, but I is warning you that if it is filthsome, I is smashing it over your sludgy little head. He picked up the snozzcumber. He began raising it on its long journey to his mouth, some 50 feet up in the air. Sophie wanted to scream, "Don't!" but that would have been even more certain death. Crouching among the slimy seeds, she felt herself being lifted up and up and up. Suddenly there was a crunch. As the Bloodbottler bit a huge chunk off the end, Sophie saw his yellow teeth clamping together, a few inches from her head. Then there was utter darkness. She was in his mouth. She caught a whiff of his evil-smelling breath. It stank of bad meat. She waited for the teeth to go crunch once more. She prayed that she would be killed quickly. Ugh! Roared the Bloodbottler. Ugh! Ugh! And he spat. All of the great lumps of snozzcumber were in his mouth. All of the great lumps of snozzcumber that were in his mouth, as well as Sophie herself, went shooting across the cave. If Sophie had struck the stony wall of the cave, she most certainly would have been killed. Instead, she hit the soft folds of the BFG's black cloak hanging against the wall. She dropped to the ground half-stunned. She crawled under the hem of the cloak, and there she crouched. "You little swine bugler," roared the Bloodbottler. "You little pig swiller." He rushed at the BFG and smashed what was left of the snozzcumber over his head. Fragments of the filthy vegetables splashed all over the cave. "You's not loving it?" the BFG asked innocently, rubbing his head. "Loving it?" yelled the Bloodbottler. "That is the most disgusting taste that is ever clutching my teeth. You must be buggles to be swallowing sludge like that. Every night you could be galloping off happy as a hamburger and gobbling juicy human beans." "Eating human beans is wrong and evil," the BFG said. "It is guzzly and glumptious," shouted the Bloodbottler, "and tonight I is galloping off to Chile to swabble a few human chili beans. Is you wishing to know why I is choosing Chile?" "I is not wishing to know anything," the BFG said, very dignified. "I is choosing Chile," the Bloodbottler said, "because I is fed up with the taste of Esquimos. It is important I has plenty of cold eat in this scuttling hot weather, and next coldest thing to an Esquimo is a chili bean. Human beings from Chile are very chilly." "Horrible," the BFG said. "You ought to be ashamed. Other giants is all saying they is wanting to gallop off to England tonight to guzzle school childers," the Bloodbottler said. "I is very fond indeed of English school childers. They has a nice inky booky flavour. Perhaps I will change my mind and go to England with them." "You is disgusting," the BFG said. "And you is an insult to the giant peoples," shouted the Bloodbottler. "You is not fit to be a giant. You is a squeaky little squiddler. You is a pibbling little pipsqueak. You is a cream puff nut." With that, the horrible blood-bottling giant strode out of the cave. The BFG ran to the cave entrance and quickly rolled the stone back into place. "Sophie," he whispered. "Sophie, where is you, Sophie?" Sophie emerged from under the hem of the black cloak. "I'm here," she said. The BFG picked her up and held her tenderly in the palm of his hand. "Oh, he is so happy to be finding you all in one lump," he said. "I was in his mouth," Sophie said. "You was what?" cried the BFG. Sophie told him what had happened. "And there I was telling him to eat the filth and snozzcumber, and you all the time was inside it," the BFG cried. "Not much fun," Sophie said. "Just look at you, you poor little chiddler," cried the BFG. "You's covered in snozzcumber and giant spit." He set about cleaning her up as best he could. "I is hating those other giants more than ever now," he said. "You know what I should like?" "What?" Sophie said. "I should like to find a way of disappearing them, every single one." "I'd be glad to help you," Sophie said. "Let me see if I can't think up a way of doing it." So, that's the end of the chapter, guys, and hopefully you've had a really good think about what the Bloodbottler's like and what you're going to do for the next part. So now that we've read that chapter and we've been introduced to the Bloodbottler, who I have to say, not a big fan of, we're going to look at, I'm just going to quickly remind you guys of what visualization is. I know you've done it before, but this is just to quickly make it all make sense. So what it is it allows you to use evidence from your reading to show how you understand or how you see or visualize that character. So use quotes to help you build this because that's where you got the information from. You've got it from the book. So it helps you to visualize it in your mind a bit clearer. It also visualization involves you using quotes and phrases and then explaining what those have shown you or what that has made you think. So when you visualize as you read, you recall what you have read for longer as well. So reading and understanding what this means helps to create a more in-depth image in your head, and it makes the story a bit more interesting and makes the story come to life if you know exactly what's going on and you can see it play out almost like a wee film in your head. Okay, so that is the main point of this. This is just a way to see that you can see what's going on. When you're doing visualization, guys, there's three main things that you need. There's three main things that we look for. There's three main things that are in your success criteria. So it's how you're going to be successful today. You use a relevant quote. You don't just pick a random quote that doesn't make sense to the character that you've just picked because maybe you like the gobble funk language in it, okay? It needs to be relevant. As well as that, when you include a quote in something, and this goes for everything, you need to put speech marks around it to show really clearly that it is a quote and that you know it's a quote and you've put it in, okay? You need to put the page number in just to show where it's from so that if you need to or if we wanted to, we could go back and go, right, this is where they've got it from, this is what's made them think this. But the third one is the most important one. An explanation of what the quote tells you. Okay? So explain what the quote has shown you. Maybe it's shown you, oh, it says that he looked quickly from side to side. So this would show us that he was suspicious, maybe. Okay? So these are three really, really important things. And the color coding I've used, because I'm going to show you an example just next. So the color coding helps you to see it. What I would recommend is at the top of your page, even if you write yourself a wee note and write the three things down so that every time you pull off from that picture of the character, you could go, right, I've got a relevant quote, I've got a page number, and I've got an explanation of what that quote is showing me. That is really, really helpful, and I would definitely recommend doing that as you go through rather than just at the end. So this is an example that I've done where I've taken quotes and I've done those three things and I've highlighted them accordingly to show you just clearly what exactly I've done. This isn't an extensive list of visualization, but hopefully it helps just to show you how you can split it up. So the first one I've written, the Bloodbottler stared suspiciously with small piggy eyes. So that was a quote that we had read through and I've said what page I got that from. I then went on to explain, which is the blue, and I said the Bloodbottler sounds like he doesn't trust anyone, not even the BFG. He is using his small eyes to search around to see if it is a trick, proving how untrusting he is. So it paints this picture of him as a very untrusting giant, he's very suspicious, and as well, from that quote, what you also could have explained was the fact that he had small eyes. That could also come up. The next one I have, so the quote, which is in green, I said, I is smashing it over your sludgy little head. The page I put was page 52 in pink, and the explanation, which is in blue, I said, this shows that the Bloodbottler can be quite violent. The Bloodbottler is threatening to beat up the BFG all over a Snaw's cumber. This shows he has a very short temper. So I've taken the quote and I've explained exactly what I got out of it. Don't just take a quote and say, this means he is cross. Try and explain it a bit more and show a bit more in-depth thinking with how you are going through it. You can, of course, you can use these examples if you want, guys, but I definitely want you to give your own a go. Hopefully that's helped you understand just exactly how you can structure your answers and things that you can cover. The explanation is really important because it helps to show that you've got this in-depth understanding of the character that we're looking at. So make sure you've got that checklist in your mind. When you finish, use the checklist and the success criteria to make sure that you have all the elements that you need. So you have your quote, which is relevant, you have your page number, and you have an explanation. Once you've done this, you can do your drawing of the Bloodbottler in the middle or at the side or at the bottom. It's up to you exactly how you do it. The main thing is that you've explained where you've got all these ideas from. So that is your task for today. I would recommend that you get at least 6. That was a really in-depth chapter with loads of explanations and loads of descriptions. So you can definitely get a good bit out of it. And as well, I've given you 2. So really try and challenge yourself and get as many as you can by yourself. Those are just examples so that you know how to word your answers. What we've also got here, guys, I've got some challenges for you. These are things that you can do as an extra. You can do 1, you can do 2, or you can do 3. You can do as many or as few as you like. It is up to you. This is just a challenge to try and push you on further with the literacy. And these are slightly more fun tasks as well. So the first one, what words has Roald Dahl used instead of said in the chapter? So how many words can you find? I think there's synonyms, sound like cinnamon, but they're synonyms for the word said. So it means the same thing, but he said it. So for example, cried or boomed. See how many different ones that you can find and what is the total amount that you find altogether. The second one that you can choose from is choose the 3 scariest events that have happened to Sophie so far. So Sophie's had quite an eventful time, and rank them from scariest to least scary. And you can give a reason for why you've decided to do that as well. The third one is, what do you think the inside of the BFG's house is like? We haven't actually been explicitly told just what it's like, but you can have a wee think, you can read through, see what you think, and you can draw me a picture of what you think it looks like. You could maybe put the BFG in, or you could put the Bloodbottler in to show just how big it is. It is completely up to you. And attach that to your assignment at the end, and then you can bounce it off to us and we will get a good look at it. So looking forward to reading your work, guys. Any questions, just ping me a message, anything like that. So hopefully you've enjoyed this chapter, and good luck with your tasks for today.